Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor to close out the show, I hear, which is amazing.
We have had a rich history of Y Combinator partners and people speak. Jessica Livingston spoke in 2012 after her book really inspired me to quit my job in 2009. And you know, yeah, really appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you and talk through so many things you're involved in and so many of the changes we're seeing. So first I want to just start, so you're the new president of YC. Congratulations.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
What do you call it? What do we call that? Your administration, your cabinet regime?
I guess.
What do we know?
I don't know. I'm just trying to serve the people, you know?
Yeah. That does sound kind of like an administration then.
Yep.
If YC were the Marvel universe, where are we in the timeline? Are we at Endgame? Are we at
I hope
Deadpool?
it's Iron Man 1.
Are we Iron Man 1? I like that. Okay.
Iron Man was a really good one. I mean, you know,
that was great. Yeah.
We're right at the beginning.
A lot of AI.
Yeah, that's right.
What's different about what are you emphasizing at YC right now? What's important to you?
I think right now, I mean, a lot of the crazier changes that we've seen are really in the type of opportunity that, I mean, I think all of you in this audience can see just the rise of intelligence, like this idea that, you know, you can actually on tap get the brilliance of maybe a 22-year-old college graduate who gets things wrong maybe 1 in 10 times. That's pretty useful, but we get to be alive at this moment where it goes from that to maybe like the 25-year-old one who, you know, sort of employee who's much more reliable and can actually tell you things that you didn't know before. And then it's about to go from that to, you know, the 160 IQ genius that you can have on tap basically any time. Like, that is the craziest thing that we get to be alive for at this moment. And if you're starting a startup right now, how crazy is that? That, like, this is happening before our eyes. You know, there are people in this audience who have, you know, I came up in high school during Web 1.0. My core, like, founder experience was during Web 2.0. And I meet, you know, sort of 22-year-olds, even 18-year-olds starting companies today who are like, oh, I feel like we missed on those things, but instead we get to be at ground zero of this right now. And that goes for everyone in this room. How lucky are we?
Totally agree. What have the core sort of fundamentals of Y Combinator, the program, the time with partners, do you think with the changes in AI and where we are post-COVID, like, are those things like, you know, time tested, shouldn't change? Do you feel like there are tweaks and things to that, or do you feel like the model that's worked for the last, 16, 17 years, like, is that still, I mean, is it?
Yeah, we're still tweaking, we're still evolving every single, every 6-month period. We sit down, we actually just did this morning with the leadership of YC. We sat down and said, what worked in the last YC batch, what didn't work. Some crazy stats that came out of that. I mean, the percentage of people right out of college who started companies who came into YC, that went from 10% to 30%. That's up 3x, which is kind of crazy. But that kind of goes to this other, the thing I was saying earlier, like, we're at a moment of this, like, crazy revolution. I think the big change that I'm really proud of that I think is going to really pay off at YC is now when you work with someone at YC, you have that person for sort of the life of your company. So YC becomes sort of your seed investor for 7% for the life of the company. And you actually have one person who's like the person. And I think when I built Initialize, that was one of the really important things. Like, we are key owners of these businesses with you. Yeah. It's not like you go to college and then maybe you see your professor once in a while. It's like, no, we should be alongside you, you know, at sort of all the junctures later. And that's actually a really big inversion. That wasn't true even 2 or 3 years ago at YC.
That's really cool. And like, those people that you meet at that early stage that really believe at the early stage, I mean, they have this place with you in your psyche, in your heart, and, you know, and sort of in your mind of like, this is somebody that's just sort of seen me over the course of this whole time. And so for them to stay engaged like that and have somebody sort of dedicated to you, working with you, that's a really, really powerful change.
Yeah, a lot of people look at me, they're like, well, you're president of YC now, are you going to be the new Paul Graham? And I tell them, absolutely not. If anything, I think of myself as the person who helps all 14 of our partners turn into, Paul Grahams of their own sort, and of which I am just one.
I think you had your own companies this batch. Is
Oh
that
yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah, I was funding companies just like all the other group partners, which actually hadn't really happened since Paul Graham was running YC directly.
It's really cool. And how does it work? How do the companies get allocated to different partners and things? Does someone say, hey, that'd be one that I'm really suited to work with, or
Yeah,
the
so
founders? Like, how does it work?
it's very collegial. So, I started reading last night. I actually put on my Apple Vision Pro and
Saw
my
that.
AirPod. It was like,
Looked really cool.
I had 15 pounds of headgear, and it was good for about 30 minutes or so. So, I'm still a big believer in AVP, though. But yeah, we're reading applications right now. It's very collegial. Everyone has, something that they really like, but when you get an interview at YC, you can know that the person that you're sitting across from, they picked you out of the magic sorting hat. Like there's something special that we saw in you, and that'll be true at the interview. That'll be true if we fund you, and that'll be true for the life of the company. That like you have someone who you can talk to who's right there with you.
When you go in, when a team goes in to meet with, they usually meet with several partners. Is that right? And then, do you have to have is it a everyone has to vote yes? Is it, hey, if just one
yes.
partner says yes, and then you kind of join their cohort?
Yep. All it
That's
takes
enough.
is one person to believe, and then the person who believes is your person.
Yeah. Is there any sort of backtracking? Hey, remember when I supported this team, and do you see that? Do you see a correlation to long-term success of like multiple partners supporting someone versus one partner, or?
It just takes one, but I think that's the crazy thing about startups. I mean, even for my startup, I remember you always remember the people who believe in you at the beginning, and that's what I think YC done right is extra amazing about. Like you just have all you need is one person to believe in you at that moment, and actually. The reason why I came back to YC is it's one of the few places where you get to meet people and believe in them even before they quite believe in themselves and their idea.
Talk to me about San Francisco. You grew up in the Bay Area, and YC has made this. It feels like there was already YC presence in San Francisco, but it's kind of a big shift there. Talk to us about why you're doing that and what thinking is behind that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to we started at the top of this talking about AI. It's no mistake that OpenAI basically spun out of YC with Sam Altman. He was in my role many years ago, and I could see why. He went off into the world and realized, here's this thing that could happen, AGI. And then he said, you know what, I'm going to build it. And we're all really glad he did. Anthropic is actually started by Y Combinator alumni. They're actually in San Francisco as well. Yep. And so we're actually in this especially interesting moment where how do you do it? How do you take advantage of a larger context window? What is retrieval augmented generation? How do I use a vector database? How do I test my prompts? What's the tooling around it? This is sort of the same moment that happened in Silicon Valley when I would argue when Oracle came up or when Sybase came up. It's like, what's SQL? What's third normal form? Like, how do these things actually work? Once again, the revolution is led by the technology, and the technologists are in San Francisco, and the coffee meetups, like we're going to have YC Launch Live at YC Friday evenings, like cool. Every other week, like to actually show real products. A lot of the tech blogs and
Let's just explain what that is. That's where people can come demo their products, other YC companies and things. Is that right? And their friends, right. I think.
Yeah, that's right. We're just going to throw, I think, back to what Michael Arrington did with TechCrunch and the TechCrunch parties that he had. Yeah. We're going to try and rekindle that with the best builders in the world right there who've moved here to San Francisco to build the future. And I think that's a really important and beautiful thing about San Francisco. Who here is a fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation or the Star Trek franchise? I know there are a lot of you out there. Imagine, there was no mistake that Gene Roddenberry chose San Francisco as the home of Starfleet Command. Like, we believe technology can remake all of society. And that's more true now than, like, right at this moment, than, like, really almost any time. Like, I pinch myself to that we get to live in this time right now. And then people from around the world, like immigrants, the smartest people, the smartest engineers, the smartest designers, the smartest product people, the smartest marketers, the smartest CEOs have congregated in, this crazy 49 square mile place. And, honestly, the Bay Area as well. And we need to make San Francisco as vibrant as possible so that it's open to any immigrant who wants to build that future and build something that touches 1 billion people.
There are, I think, thousands of, I don't know if you know how many, but YC alum that are actually here. And so I guess that you kind of have that network effect of people actually being that huge. There's a huge part of the network that's here. Do you feel like, in terms of starting and founding your company, you did your last batch back in person? Everyone was back here, I believe. They didn't have to be from here, stay here. I don't think, or did they?
A good majority of people now, probably more than 50%, are staying in the San Francisco Bay Area, and maybe 20 to 30% are staying in San Francisco proper, within even a few miles of the YC campus.
Wow.
Right in Dogpatch. So we think like Mission Bay, Dogpatch, Potrero Hill, I love Mission Dolores. Like, there are places that are incredibly high concentration of the best builders, and you want to be right next to them so that you can actually take advantage of every other day. There's some crazy innovation that's happening.
So do you if I'm a founding team and I'm in some other place outside of California or outside the Bay Area, like, do you advise come here and stay here? Do you advise come here, do YC, leave? Do you what do you say?
Come here, apply to YC, get plugged in with all the best builders of your generation, stay in San Francisco, and go all in right now, because there is just this moment for brand new elements on the periodic table of startups are being discovered right now. And guess what? You all are the physicists.
I want to talk about AI. I want to just, as we finish on San Francisco, you, in what I have seen to be extremely brave and an unenvious position from where I'm sitting, but you've taken up this sort of charge to try to fix some of the really tough things that are happening in San Francisco and in the Bay Area. It's absolutely happening down here too, and in the Bay Area. Why have you done that? Where does the passion come from, and what do you hope happens over the next couple of years, or is that too soon? Are we looking out a decade, 2 decades before we can expect anything? What do you think?
Great question. The amazing thing about San Francisco is we're actually personally, I feel like I'm 3 years into the project. So we got rid of a sitting district attorney. We removed 3 school board members who wanted to remove algebra from public middle schools. Unbelievable. We actually won multiple We actually won back half of the Board of Supervisors, and we're going to take the other half in November. And as long as we keep the mayor, we actually will have fixed San Francisco, at least from the leadership standpoint. Then the real work begins. It's a $14 billion budget. There's a crazy amount of grift and graft from nonprofits. That's just the beginning, but to even get here is something that I think is a pretty enduring story in a time when the world is more divided than ever, but we're rallying around the simplest possible things that we could want. We want safe streets, we want super strong public schools, and we want to build housing so that we can house all of the immigrants from around the world who want to come and create Starfleet Command, and that's so powerful.
One of the things that's really most incredible to me about the work that you do there is your optimism, because as I think about it and as I look around, it's so easy. I've been here since I came here for an internship in 2005, and it's just so easy to get discouraged with how things have progressed. But I see you making real progress and fighting really hard things, and yet keeping your optimism. How do you do that?
Well, I work in startups, so you kind of have to be almost pathological optimists, but I actually think we have really good reason to be very optimistic, both about startups and about politics, because it's the same skills. How do you find something that, I believe X, but nobody else believes it yet? And it's the same skill to teach someone that, I've built something that is of great value. It's the same skill as, hey, there's a hole in the boat, and we need to plug the boat. And if we don't plug the boat, this whole boat will sink, and we don't want that, right? It's the same thing. What a startup is and what a political movement is. They're both social movements. And how does that happen? It happens through first people, like real people power, actually going out, getting out of your room, getting out of your computer even, getting out of Twitter and going to meet people in real life. Like, who are your real users? Who are your real customers? Who's the person working on the nonprofit that is on the front lines of the fentanyl epidemic? Let's go meet them. Like, go talk to your users, go talk to the people who are out there, and then form your own mental model for what is needed, what's happening, what could I do? And then go and do just that one thing. Do the unscalable thing, right? Like, if it's raise a dollar, raise a dollar. If it's to go and protest something or go to a local city council meeting just so you can hear what the argument is, like, go do that. Like, do the unscalable thing, and then harness that, raise money, raise awareness, and then suddenly, like, people are talking about it. Suddenly, something changed. A little thing changed. Like, not something really huge, but something small enough that you can take that win and you can go explain it to someone else. And then you have another donor. You have another, like, it's crazy the overlap between doing a startup and trying to move society in a political way.
Wow, you make it sound so easy.
It's not easy. None of it's easy. It's scary.
It's simple.
It's scary AF,
Simple, maybe.
right?
Yeah.
It is incredibly simple, but for the same reason that a startup is hard.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a yes every
Fundamentals.
single day,
Yeah.
right? In fact, a lot of people are going to say no. In fact, some people, I got death threats and I got my home doxxed yesterday on Twitter. And so
Terrible.
It's not going to be easy. But how is that different than being a founder who you lost your best customer that day, right? Like, it's, intense, but like, these things can happen and you can just move on. Like, there are just ways about it that, like, the founder gets up and says, you know what, I'm going to keep soldiering because I know that I believe X and everyone is going to believe that soon.
Well, as somebody who didn't leave during the pandemic, who stayed here, who's raised a family of 4 kids here, and trying to make sense of some of the things going on, I just want to say that you and what you're doing, although I don't tweet about it and I, don't shout about it from the rooftops, but like, in my home, it's super inspiring, and I do talk to my kids about some of the things you're doing and the coalition that you're building, and I hope once you can fix the Bay Area, maybe you can go fix, some other bigger problems we have in the country. I don't know, but
I appreciate it.
Really, really grateful, genuinely grateful for what you're doing. So you had demo day just recently in the last few weeks, and you've just now had applications close on the next batch. AI is, we've seen these different waves. You mentioned Web 2. There was, we've seen crypto. We've seen Web 3. We've seen, SaaS. We've seen all these different things kind of come. How is AI different, bigger? Like, how is, there's this sort of criticism that it is, it's just the new, tech people are trying to market, their software in a new way. How is it, from where you sit, fundamentally different from some of these other trends we've seen over the last few decades?
I think the most powerful idea that I've heard recently, it was actually from one of the earliest large 9-figure exit founders. So Jake Heller from Casetext, mega AI win. He sold that company for $600 million to Thomson Reuters. He was actually one of the first people to get access to GPT-4.
Wow.
And he pivoted. It was actually an 8-year-old company. He hard pivoted the company to go all in on adding intelligence and a co-pilot for lawyers. And it was so important that I think that Thomson Reuters saw that and said, "Oh, the times they are changing, and we need to buy this before we get run over by it." And I think the most interesting thing he told me, because he was, he's still on the cutting edge of building large language models that are extremely practical, that solve real problems. Like, this is something that turbocharges lawyers. And he said, based on what I'm seeing right now, it's going to be possible that you have companies worth $1 billion, even driving $1 billion revenue, that only have 5 employees. And I heard Sam Altman recently make it an even better meme, which is you're going to have companies with $1 billion revenue that have only 1 founder, which is, I admit, 10 times better, about 5 times better meme. But I think that that's a really powerful moment to just sort of understand what this might mean. Like, I don't know for certain if that happens. And in fact, like, after Jake spoke to my set of companies in YC about this, most of the questions were a little bit about society, like what's going to happen to all the jobs. And I don't claim to have a sense for what's going to happen there. But I think it's more, for this audience, like, this is sort of the revolution that could happen, that you could bring about. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to displace jobs. In fact, the better version of it is actually the co-pilot. Like, I actually think that we will have, hopefully, more knowledge workers who are way supercharged, who can do work that is far more interesting, far more valuable than, and if you're a founder, what that might mean, and I spend a lot of time with companies that have 1,000 employees, 10,000 employees, some of the biggest startups in the Valley and elsewhere. And behind closed doors, the biggest frustration really is how running a company of that size, the bureaucratic headache isn't, like, trying to get anything done is a nightmare. And I think that that's exactly where AI and large language models as a source of general intelligence, it's such a powerful moment. Like, why not? Why can't there be a better way to manage teams of thousands of people? Like, and we're seeing these, like, very interesting, weird, very early demos of things that could help. I saw, Zapier is a great YC company.
They were here yesterday.
And they just released Zapier Central. And their core demo I thought was fascinating. Just using natural language, you hook up Slack, you tell it who your direct reports are, it reads all of your Slack messages, and then auto-generates a Google Drive with what your next one-on-one could be about. And they do it, like, in a live demo on stage in 5 or 10 minutes. That's one of the things that they did at our YC launch event recently. And I'm like, that's crazy. Like, that's actually why these launch events are so fascinating, because, like, it's back to 2008 when, like, you could have a demo that's like, oh, I didn't even know that computers could do that.
I think it's because of postures, but do you see yourself as, like, a consumer founder? Like, is consumer at your core? Is that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I love it. Yeah.
So talk to us about. I feel like, AI's had this huge impact on consumers. Well, there's, like, this wave, like, oh, consumer's cool again. Like,
I'm excited about that.
What are you seeing? Like, why is that? And why is consumer maybe an opportunity for startups?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, I ran a startup called Posterous. It was Dead Simple Blogs by email. And sorry it didn't work out. We ended up selling it to Twitter.
Yeah,
but
not the worst.
Yeah, it was, I'm happy about it, but I would rather have run Instagram, obviously. We actually our growth actually flatlined the day Instagram came out.
Wow.
And so for founders in the audience, that's probably the hardest thing that you actually, like, that's why YC exists to some degree, I think, and that's why I like to work with founders. Like, it actually really helps to have someone right next to you to try to help you make sense of like the fog of war. Like we didn't actually know why we were growing. We were just growing at that moment. We didn't know why we stopped growing. We thought it was 5 other things. Only in 2020 hindsight can you go
Wow.
back and look at it. But history, like we said, history does not repeat, but it does rhyme. And so what I think's happening with consumer AI right now is that you remember Instagram, then there was Snap, and then there was sort of this moment where there was anonymous social networks, whether it was like Secret or Yik Yak. And I was a very early investor in Secret, and it actually really informed my understanding of consumer. Where as you went further out on the consumer spectrum, the retention cohort curve started dipping down. And then the weird thing about Secret in particular was like it actually was very high, and then at some point people decided this is bad for my life, and then it went from like very high retention to 0 retention, which I had never seen before. But I think that that's actually a really useful thing for any consumer, both investors but also founders, to think about right now. If you look at consumer categories broadly, you could just look at the long-term cohort retention. Posturous's was actually 20%, which is right at the bare minimum of what you need long-term in order to run a business of any value, which is interesting. I learned that from my friend Suhail Doshi, who ran Mixpanel at the time, and he said that he saw quite a few. He saw all the things that worked and all the things that didn't.
Yeah,
in Web
he's got
2.0.
everyone's data coming through. Yeah.
So he would never say whose data it was, but in aggregate, it was 20% long-term cohort retention that really mattered. And so, to put that in perspective, it means 1 in 5 people who try your product use it forever. So, and that's why consumer fell off a cliff, because obviously you could say too many people tried too many things, but at the same time, like the marginal consumer startup, consumer fell off a cliff when the next consumer startup could not hit that 1 in 5 people stick with the thing forever. Of course, like valuable companies are, if you take a corporate finance class, it turns out it's not what your VC says your valuation is. It's actually the net present value of all future cash flows, and that actually maps directly to long-term cohort retention. And of course, we're on the eve of the release of one of the greatest consumer startup, sort of straight up lines in the past recent history in ChatGPT. So, if you put 2 and 2 together, of course, consumer AI, now's the time for that, because you have this entire generation of things that were like maybe a little bit too marginal, just under that line of 20%. But when you have literally a human-like intelligence that could interact with people, that could, know everything about you, and like also make you feel things that normally you wouldn't be able. Like, we humans like crave interaction, we crave love, we crave presence, we crave to be understood. And here's a alien intelligence. But an alien intelligence that never gets tired, that will always be there, that anyone could prompt. I mean, it's a general intelligence, and it's only going to get better from here. Like, of course, consumer AI is back.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that in spite of all the connectivity and the tooling and the devices and everything that we have, humans are lonelier than they've ever been in the history of humankind. And virtually everyone feels loneliness at some degree, but huge percentage of the population, all over the world, maybe it's a little bit worse in Western Europe than it is in the United States, or vice versa, depending on the stats. But like, do you think AI increases this trend on loneliness and sort of isolation of humans? Do you think it has the potential to unlock and change some of the sort of negative trends that some technology has had on on our sort of human experience?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if these companies are going to go all the way, but I'm very excited about a couple of these. I funded a company called Maya in the relationship counseling space. So imagine an alien intelligence that's infinitely smart and never gets tired, right there helping you live your best life with one of your most important life partners, with your spouse. Like, how powerful is that? Like, if that could work, I think much has been made about virtual or AI girlfriend boyfriend. Like, I think that that's kind of the road
Why are you
towards.
pointing at me?
Sorry, I don't.
Love you, Erica, wherever you are.
That's right. But I mean, I think that's an interesting like point counterpoint, right? Like, the technology can bring us to a point where we are less connected to human beings, or it can certainly be something that connects us more to other human beings. And it's a choice. It's actually kind of up to you. Like, what do you want to work on?
I wanted to just ask you about ChatGPT and startups building tools sort of on top of it, adjacent to it. They've come out and said, you know, hey, like, we're going where we're going, so, you know, kind of extrapolate from that what you will. What do you advise startups that are like, hey, I've got this great idea, it's basically, you know, this plus ChatGPT or this, like, how do I know if I've got something that has a staying power versus like, I'm going to be, you know, sort of consumed by, you know, that rock that's already going down the hill in the next few months?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically this maybe goes back to the lean startup versus fat startup thing. Like, if you are a multi-time founder and you've already had exits and all that, maybe go do the fat startup, right? Maybe you do the fat consumer startup. But for people who are starting out, actually, all of the opportunity, I think, is in picking off a vertical where, you know, you and your co-founder can fight tooth and nail for that one set of users. And it doesn't have to be, you know, the 10 or $100 billion company. You're trying to find that one thing that could get you to $100 million a year revenue, and it turns out like that's the best thing. Like, you could be don't try to make the thing for all lawyers. You can make it just for, say, appellate lawyers, or just like this particular type, and you can make the thing that solves all the problems, that, you know, basically beats everyone else in that one narrow thing. Like, 2 or 3 people can do that and carve out something that's great. And then once you get there, then you have options, right? Like, you're driving $10, $20 million a year in revenue. You actually don't even maybe need to raise money outside. You could just start growing it organically out of cash flow.
Yeah.
Then you own a lot of your business. Like, that's great.
That's a great life.
Like, that's the kind of stuff that can happen now.
Yeah, dude, I was going to ask you that based off of what we were talking about earlier. This like one person can start $1 billion company. Do you think that person needs to go through YC or raise even the smallest amount of capital, or should they? Do you think they just figure out how to do it bootstrapping?
I mean, I think
We hope they do.
I think bootstrapping is great. I have lots of friends who do it. In fact, we have a lot of some of the most amazing YC companies never raised a dime outside of their demo day round. Zapier being one of them, actually. And so, you know, that's absolutely, you know, taking YC money doesn't preclude being extremely capital efficient and eschewing like the VC world entirely. I guess the weird thing about YC is that we basically give away all the advice and the principles for free. And the reason to do it is actually the accountability and the network and the people around you who will actually help lift you up in that sort of moment when things aren't going well. You know, you can read about things all the time, but you truly are the average of like the 10 or 20 people you spend all your time with. And I think that's something, as, you know, it's kind of like the hair club for men. Like, I'm not just the president, I'm also a client. Like, I remember going through my startup life, and thank God there are people who are old enough to know that reference.
Is this another reference at me, Gary?
Definitely. But you know, I was giving that talk to a group of 18 to 22-year-olds, and that joke totally fell flat. So I really appreciate that you guys laughed. But yeah, I think that having people around you to actually lift you up at that moment, that's actually, you know, YC is actually a guild for founders.
Okay, the last thing that's a beautiful way to say it. The last thing I was just going to ask you is, I'm thinking of myself working at Electronic Arts in 2007, 2008, trying to get the courage to quit my job. And I wonder what you would say to somebody who's thinking about doing a startup, who is trying to make sense of if they can or should. What would you say to that person about why they should give doing a startup a chance?
Oh, man. I actually have a very important thing for that person to understand. and the scariest thing to learn. And I actually think that YC is very good at trying to teach this, but it's the difference between starting a startup via mimesis, so just taking the values of other people and seeing, oh, who invested? Oh, is it a hot space? I read in TechCrunch that blah blah blah. Like this blogger or this, or even me, it's like, oh, Garry Tan tweeted about blah. Like I should do a startup about that. Like that's living life purely from other people's, sort of mimetic desire. It's like that's not coming from a place of, authenticity or yourself. Actually, that's allowing like society to come and just sort of dictate to you what's important and what's valuable. I find it much more important to think in a first principles way. What have I seen? What have I seen that nobody else has seen? What customers or problems do I know about that nobody else knows about? What technologies can I build that I genuinely think like that's kind of a stretch for me to try to do, but I think I could do it. Like living life in sort of a first principles way, not from like copying others, but like being true to yourself. That's the thing that I read like, I don't know, 300 applications last night.
Wow.
And then I think that was the thing that really jumped out at me. Like, it's kind of
You can
obvious.
read it? Can you can
Oh
read
yeah,
it?
you can see it immediately in the application. Like, is this person living by pure mimesis, like just things that I read about that like, oh, this is a startup. It's sort of like playing startup house, right? Or, the best people I love to work with, they teach me something every single day. It's like, I was in this room, this thing happened, like, your OpenAI does blah, but guess what? People don't want that thing. They want this other thing. And I know because I talked to 10 people and I built this thing and now they're using that. Like that is real, authentic understanding of what's going on. And that's what I want to understand. Like don't give me the what's hot or what I saw Sequoia say or what Andreessen said or what even Initialize said, whatever. Like I don't care about that. I want to hear what you have to say, and I want to know how you know that thing. And that alone will allow you to create things that nobody else in the world has created yet.
Garry Tan, Y Combinator, thank you so much. Thanks. That was awesome.
Thank you.